Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
Nobody expected this to happen on Jenna and Friends. What started as a heartfelt conversation about aging gracefully turned into one of the most talked about daytime TV clashes of the year. Jenna Bush, known for her Southern charm and warm interviewing style, wanted a wholesome debate on the question, should seniors move in with family or maintain independence in retirement communities? Enter Blake Shelton, country superstar, family man, outspoken believer in old-school values. He walked onto that set smiling, ready to talk music and maybe share a laugh. But within minutes, the conversation took a sharp turn from friendly banter to personal jabs, and then to something nobody saw coming. The set of Jenna and Friends had its usual cozy energy, a blend of laughter, polished smiles, and that comforting backdrop of soft pastel decor. Jenna Bush, seated comfortably in her signature armchair, radiated warmth as she introduced the next guest. Please welcome one of country music's biggest stars, and honestly one of my favorite people, the one and only Blake Shelton. The audience erupted in cheers, and Blake Shelton strolled onto the stage with that familiar swagger, cowboy boots tapping against the studio floor. His wide grin, paired with a casual denim jacket, instantly put fans at ease. He tipped his hat slightly and hugged Jenna before settling into the chair across from her. "Well, look at you," Jenna teased with that southern twang that often slipped out when she was excited. "Blake Shelton in the house. I feel like we should have brought out some sweet tea and a porch swing." Blake chuckled, his voice carrying that deep, easygoing drawl. "Well, Jenna, you know I'm always up for sweet tea. Porch swing, even better. Just hope you don't make me sing right now because I left my guitar backstage." The crowd laughed, and for a moment, it felt like any other light-hearted segment. Jenna leaned forward, clasping her hands in that curious, slightly mischievous way she did when she was about to pivot. "So, Blake," she began, tilting her head, "you're a proud country boy, family-oriented, traditional roots. And that brings me to something we've been talking about all week on the show. What do you think about this question? Should seniors move in with family or keep their independence in retirement communities?" Blake raised his eyebrows and gave a little whistle. "Wow, Jenna, you're not wasting any time, are you?" He leaned back, looking amused but thoughtful. "I mean, that's a big one, and you're asking a guy whose mama still calls him every other day to make sure he's eating vegetables." The audience chuckled, but Jenna didn't let him off the hook. "Come on, Blake, seriously. People have strong opinions about this. Some say living with family keeps elders connected and loved. Others say independence is key for dignity and mental health." Blake's easy smile softened and he nodded slowly. "You know, Jenna, where I come from, family means everything. You don't just put your folks in some place and visit twice a year. You take care of them, under your roof, in your home. That's how I was raised." The crowd gave a light clap of approval, and Jenna nodded, her expression still warm, but with a flicker of curiosity. "That's beautiful," she said. "But do you think times have changed, with how busy life is today? Careers, kids, commitments, it's a lot." Blake shrugged, resting an elbow on the armrest. "Well, times can change all they want. Doesn't mean our values should. If family's important, you make it work. That's what I believe." His tone wasn't sharp, yet, but it carried a firmness that caught Jenna off guard. She blinked, smiled, and tried to keep it light. Fair enough. But what about the argument that seniors deserve independence? That living with family can sometimes feel limiting? Blake tilted his head, a glint of challenge in his eyes. "Limiting, Jenna? What's limiting about being surrounded by the people who love you the most? What's limiting about grandkids running around, Sunday dinners, laughing at the kitchen table. I'd say that's freedom, the good kind. The applause was louder this time, but there was a shift in the room, a subtle undercurrent of tension. Jenna caught it too. She smiled, but her next words were more pointed. I hear you, Blake. I just think not everyone feels that way. And honestly, some would argue that clinging to that idea of keeping everyone under one roof might be unrealistic or even unhealthy in today's world. Blake let out a slow laugh, the kind that hinted he was trying to stay polite. Unhealthy, huh? Well, Jenna, I guess we're gonna have ourselves a conversation. The camera zoomed in on Jenna's face, still smiling, but now with a spark of challenge in her eyes. And just like that, the tone of the room shifted. This wasn't just friendly banter anymore. The polite start was over. Something was brewing, and the audience could feel it. The audience's polite laughter and applause had settled into an attentive hush. Blake Shelton shifted in his chair, the easy grin fading just slightly as Jenna leaned forward, her elbows on her knees. She was done with warm-up questions. This was where the heart of the debate began. Blake, Jenna started, her tone measured but firm. I grew up in a family that valued closeness too, but I also saw the other side. My grandparents had a wonderful time in their retirement community. They had friends, activities, independence, and my mom and dad, they didn't have to feel guilty about not being able to do it all themselves. Doesn't that sound fair too? Blake tilted his head, the twinkle in his eyes dimming into something sharper. Fair? I don't know if fair is the right word. Jenna, with all due respect, I think what you're describing is convenience. Sure, a retirement place might give folks a bingo night or a walking club, but can that replace a family's love? Can that replace a grandchild climbing into your lap or your daughter cooking your favorite meal on a Sunday afternoon? I just don't buy it. The audience murmured, some nodding in agreement, others shifting in their seats. Jenna caught the subtle divide, and her instincts as a host told her to lean in. But Blake, she pressed, what if the family can't provide that care? What if both parents are working full-time, the kids are in school, and the elder parent needs more support than the family can realistically give? Isn't there dignity in seniors making their own choice to live where they can thrive? Blake straightened up now, his shoulders broadening, his tone deepening with conviction. Jenna, I hear what you're saying. I do. But here's my problem. We've become a society that looks for the easy way out. Families used to make sacrifices. They rearranged their lives, their homes, their priorities, because taking care of your own was what mattered most. Now, too many people treat mom and dad like a burden they don't want to carry. The audience let out an audible ooh, sensing the sting in his words. Jenna's smile froze for a second, then returned, but it carried a new edge. That's a pretty strong accusation, Blake. Are you saying families who choose retirement communities don't love their parents? Blake's jaw tightened, though he kept his voice calm. I'm saying love isn't just words, Jenna. It's action. If you love someone, you don't outsource that responsibility. You make space, you make time, you do whatever it takes. That's what I believe. The tension in the studio thickened. Jenna sat back, crossing her legs, her tone shifting from friendly to firm. But don't you think that's a little black and white? Families today aren't living in the same world as 50 years ago. Some people don't have the money, the space, or even the training to care for an aging parent. Retirement communities exist for a reason. They're not just storage units for the elderly. Blake leaned forward, his hand resting on his knee, his voice rising slightly. I get that life is hard, Jenna. I'm not blind to it. But when you say you don't have the money, or the space, or the training, I hear excuses. What parents gave to their kids growing up, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the financial strain, you can't tell me we don't owe it back to them in their later years. The crowd clapped, some cheering, while others remained silent. Jenna smiled tightly, clearly determined not to let Blake have the final word. I think it's more complicated than that, she countered. You talk about sacrifice, but what about balance? What about parents who don't want to be under their children's roof, who want their own space, their own friends, their own life? Isn't forcing them into a family household just as unfair as abandoning them? Blake paused, his expression shifting for just a beat. If a parent truly wants independence, I'd respect that, he admitted, his voice softer for a moment. But what I see, Jenna, is a culture that pushes seniors toward independence because the younger generation doesn't want the responsibility. That's not independence. That's being nudged out. The audience murmured again, sensing the depth of the disagreement. Jenna sat taller, her voice now carrying the authority of a host defending her ground. You say it's excuses, Blake. I say it's reality. I think families who choose retirement communities often do it out of love, not laziness, because they want their parents to have medical support, social connection, and safety. That doesn't mean they've stopped caring. It means they're being realistic. Blake gave a small shake of his head, his drawl thickening as his frustration crept in. Realistic, maybe, but to me, it sounds like we're forgetting what family's supposed to mean. We can have all the retirement communities in the world, but if we lose that core value, the one where family sticks together no matter what, then I think we've lost something bigger than convenience. The applause was mixed now, some loud, some hesitant. The set no longer felt cozy. It felt like a battleground of ideas. Jenna forced a smile, but her eyes locked on Blake's with unmistakable fire. The friendly tone that opened the show was gone. What had started as polite disagreement was now a sharp clash of values, and everyone watching knew this debate wasn't cooling down anytime soon. The air in the studio was thick now. No more polite laughter, no more easy smiles. The tension was sharp enough that even the cameras seemed to hesitate before cutting between Blake Shelton's steely glare and Jenna Bush's tightly composed expression. The audience leaned in, sensing that the friendly banter had given way to something raw, personal, and far more dangerous. Jenna broke the silence first, her voice calm but weighted with something heavier. Blake, I think you're being unfair to families who are trying their best. My grandfather, President George H.W. Bush, chose to spend his later years in a retirement community. He wasn't forced. He wasn't abandoned. He wanted to be surrounded by friends, by people who understood his stage of life. And you know what? My family still visited him all the time. We were still there. Love doesn't disappear just because someone is under the same roof. Blake's jaw clenched, and he let out a long breath, shaking his head slowly. Jenna, I respect your family, I do. But let me tell you a story. My grandma, she lived with us when I was a kid. We didn't have much. Lord knows the house was cramped, but every morning I'd wake up to her humming in the kitchen, making biscuits from scratch. She was part of us. I can't imagine her locked away in some facility, no matter how nice. That's what made us a family. That's what shaped me. The audience sighed, some even clapping, touched by the tenderness in his voice. But Jenna leaned forward, her tone sharp now, unwilling to let the emotional pull go unanswered. Jenna, do you hear yourself? You're romanticizing your story while dismissing others. Not every family can do that. Not every grandma can or wants to wake up and make biscuits in a crowded house. Some seniors want freedom from being a burden. My grandfather told us that himself. He didn't want his kids and grandkids rearranging their lives for him. He wanted us to live fully while he did the same. Blake's eyes darkened, his voice deepening as his frustration spilled through. And that's where we're different, Jenna. To me, the idea of a parent being a burden, that's the problem. They gave us life. They raised us. They sacrificed everything. And now when the roles should reverse, when it's our turn to give back too many folks are looking for a polite way to shove it aside. That word, burden, breaks my heart. The crowd stirred, murmurs running through the seats. Jenna's lips pressed tight, her voice trembling slightly but filled with conviction. You think I don't love my grandparents? You think my family didn't give back? We gave everything, Blake. We sat by hospital beds, we took late-night calls, we grieved together, but we also respected their wishes. Not everyone defines love the same way you do. Sometimes love means letting go of control, letting your parents choose what gives them dignity. The clash of personal values was no longer abstract. It was raw and intimate, and it left the audience hanging on every word. Blake leaned forward, his voice rising, the Oklahoma drawl sharpening with emotion. But that's where I think we're letting society change us. We're letting dignity mean distance and independence mean isolation. What about the dignity of knowing your family wants you close? What about the independence of being in the heart of your family's life instead of on the edge of it? The audience gasped, applause breaking out, while Jenna visibly stiffened. For the first time, her polished TV composure slipped. She leaned in, her voice quieter but cutting. You're painting this picture like every retirement community is a sad little room where people sit alone. That's not true. My grandfather played golf, had dinners, laughed with friends. It was joyful, Blake, joyful. And he still had us by his side. You can't tell me that's isolation. Blake's hand tapped against his knee, a restless energy building. His voice cracked just slightly as he pushed back. I've been in those communities, Jenna. I've sung for folks there. I've seen the ones with no family visiting, staring at doors that never open. And I'll never forget that look in their eyes, the look of being forgotten. Don't tell me it doesn't happen. It happens too much. The room fell into silence. Even Jenna faltered, her hand tightening on her note cards. The weight of Blake's words, the memory of loneliness hung heavy. But Jenna regrouped, straightening her shoulders, her tone now softer but no less forceful. Maybe the issue isn't retirement communities themselves, Blake. Maybe it's the families who don't show up. Maybe the problem isn't the choice of where seniors live, but how we treat them, no matter where they are. That's the real failing. The audience applauded, a swelling of support for her reframing. Blake nodded slowly, but his voice carried an edge of defeat. Maybe you're right, but to me, it still feels like the first step down a road where family stops being family. And that scares me. The studio was divided, half the audience clapping for Jenna's vision of balance and dignity, half clapping for Blake's plea for closeness and sacrifice. For a moment, they both sat back, breathing heavily, the weight of their words hanging in the room like smoke. The debate had gone from hypothetical to deeply personal, and everyone watching knew it wasn't over. The next words would decide whether this clash cooled or combusted. The tension in the studio had reached a level where every breath felt amplified. The audience sat frozen, their eyes darting between Blake Shelton and Jenna Bush as if watching two tectonic plates grinding against each other. Jenna leaned forward again, her voice low but firm. Blake, you're clinging to this idea that family under one roof is the only way to honor them. That's not the world we live in anymore. People are working two jobs, raising kids, trying to survive. It's not fair to make them feel like failures if they can't bring their parents into the home. Blake's eyes narrowed, and he let out a slow, almost weary laugh that had no humor in it. So that's it? Life's too busy, the world's too hard, so parents just get outsourced? Jenna, my daddy used to say, you don't measure love by convenience, you measure it by sacrifice. That's what family's supposed to mean. That's what I believe we're losing. The audience erupted in applause, some standing, some shouting their agreement. But Jenna, unfazed, raised her voice above the noise. And my family believes love also means listening. My grandfather didn't want to be a burden. He said it himself. He chose independence. You keep talking like retirement communities are cages, but for some people, they're freedom. Freedom from guilt. Freedom from feeling like they're holding their family back. Her words echoed across the studio, sharp and unyielding. Blake leaned forward again, his elbows on his knees, his voice breaking with frustration. Freedom? Or an easy excuse? I can't stop picturing those seniors I sang for, waiting for kids who never came. You tell me that's freedom, Jenna. Tell me to my face that those people sitting alone in wheelchairs at Christmas dinner were free. The studio went quiet. Jenna's lips trembled, but she steadied herself, speaking with a conviction that cut clean through. No, Blake, that's abandonment. That's failure. But don't you dare confuse that with families who show up, who love, who respect the choices their elders make. My grandfather wasn't forgotten. He was cherished. And if you can't see the difference, then maybe your vision of family is too narrow. It was the sharpest exchange yet, her voice fierce, his eyes blazing. The audience gasped, some applauding Jenna, others shouting support for Blake. Blake's chest rose and fell heavily. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand across his face, and for the first time, his composure cracked. You know what, Jenna? Maybe you're right. Maybe my way doesn't work for everybody. But I'll tell you this. If I ever see my mama or daddy looking at me with those same empty eyes I saw in that nursing home, I'll never forgive myself. And that's not something I can just debate on TV. The audience erupted in sympathetic applause, touched by the rawness in his voice. Jenna softened slightly, sensing his breaking point. Blake, I don't doubt your love. I never have. But not every story is yours. And not every family can live up to the picture you paint. We have to allow grace for different paths. For a moment, it seemed like the storm might settle. The air was heavy but calmer, the edges of the argument dulling as emotion gave way to reflection. But Blake wasn't finished. Not yet. He looked directly at Jenna, his voice quiet but searing. Grace is one thing, Jenna, but letting society convince us that distance equals love, that scares me more than anything. And if that's the future, I don't want any part of it. He stood up suddenly, the motion startling the audience and even the cameras, which scrambled to follow him. The crowd gasped, whispers buzzing like static, as Blake adjusted his jacket. Blake, Jenna called, her voice softer now, almost pleading. But Blake shook his head. I said my piece. Y'all can clap, argue, twist it however you want. But for me, this ain't just a debate. It's my family. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm okay with seeing us lose that. And with that, Blake Shelton turned and walked off the set, the audience half clapping, half silent in stunned disbelief. Jenna sat frozen in her chair, her cards trembling slightly in her hands, her polished hostess smile struggling to return. The cameras captured every second, the slow applause, the unsettled audience, and Jenna's attempt to pull the moment back together. Well, she said finally, her voice steady but tinged with emotion, that's what happens when something really matters. It's not easy, it's not clean, it's personal. And maybe that's the point. The audience erupted in respectful applause, but the image of Blake walking away lingered like a shadow over the set. The clash was over, but the conversation was only just beginning. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the audience's applause softened into an uneasy quiet. Blake Shelton was gone, his boots still echoing in people's ears as he walked off the set, leaving Jenna Bush sitting alone at the table, holding the weight of the conversation in her hands. For a moment, nobody moved. The cameras panned slowly across the audience, capturing the mix of shock, empathy, and reflection painted across their faces. It wasn't the explosive, angry kind of walk-off that daytime TV sometimes thrives on. No, this was heavier, more personal. Blake hadn't stormed off in defiance. He had walked away carrying the burden of a truth he couldn't shake. Jenna took a breath, set her cue cards aside, and leaned closer to the audience. Her tone shifted from debate to something rawer, almost confessional. You know, this is exactly why we have these conversations. Because it's not just about statistics or trends. It's about love, about guilt, about fear. And it's about what kind of children and what kind of parents we choose to be. The audience leaned in, their silence saying more than applause ever could. Blake's heart is enormous, and I hope you all saw that tonight. For him, caring for his parents under one roof isn't just an opinion, it's his identity. It's how he defines loyalty. And I respect that more than I can say. But I also know that every family's story is different, and we can't afford to judge each other so harshly for the paths we take. The crowd broke into gentle applause, less fiery than before, but warmer, more thoughtful. A voice from the audience called out, "We love you, Blake." And though he was long gone from the stage, it felt like the words still reached him somewhere. Jenna smiled, though her eyes betrayed the weight of the debate. You see, this isn't really about Blake versus me. It's about all of us. It's about that phone call you've been putting off to your mom, or that visit to your dad you've delayed. It's about the conversations we avoid because they're too hard, too emotional. But those are the conversations that shape our families for generations. She paused, letting the message breathe. Then, with the practiced warmth of someone who knows how to connect across a camera lens, she turned back to viewers at home. If you're watching this tonight, I want you to think about your own family. Maybe you believe, like Blake, that nothing should ever separate you from your parents in their later years. Or maybe you've seen your loved ones thrive in independent communities, making new friends, finding freedom in ways you couldn't give them at home. Both can be acts of love. Both can be valid. What matters is the honesty and the intention behind the choice. The camera cut to audience members nodding, some holding hands with the person next to them. "Here's the truth," Jenna said, her voice firm now. "There's no one-size-fits-all answer. What's right for Blake's family might not be right for mine or for yours. But what we cannot do is stay silent, avoid the topic, and leave our loved ones wondering what will happen when the time comes. Talk about it, plan it, ask your parents what they want, and then meet that desire with as much love and respect as you can muster." The crowd erupted in applause, stronger now, more united than before. "And as for Blake," Jenna added with a smile tugging at the corner of her lips, "I know he'll be back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but I know him. He loves too fiercely to let a tough debate keep him away for long." That drew laughter, breaking the tension at last, and the audience clapped warmly. Jenna leaned back in her chair, her voice dropping to a final, reflective note. "Family isn't just where we live. It's not the roof over our heads or the walls we build around us. Family is the promise we keep, that we will show up for one another, whether under the same roof, across the street, or in the heart we carry. And if we can all remember that, then maybe, just maybe, we can bridge the divide between independence and togetherness." The audience rose in a standing ovation, not just for Jenna, not just for Blake, but for the conversation itself. As the credits began to roll, the image that lingered wasn't the clash, the sharp words, or even the walk-off. It was the reminder that when it comes to love, no debate ever truly ends. It just carries forward into our homes, our choices, and the stories we'll someday leave behind.